My name is Clara Whitfield. I am 28 years old. And the morning I found out my parents had sold my grandmother's land, the land she had left specifically, legally, irrevocably to me, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands and a certified letter from a county recorder's office telling me that the deed had been transferred 8 days ago. 8 days. They had sold it 8 days ago and said nothing. I read the letter 3 times. Then I set it down on the table very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands are not entirely steady, and I looked out the window at the parking lot below my apartment and I thought about my grandmother. About her hands. About the way she smelled like cedar and coffee. About a specific afternoon when I was 11 years old and she took me to walk the edge of that land, 41 acres of southern Ohio woodland, and told me to listen. "What do you hear?" she said. "Nothing," I said. "That's not nothing," she said. "That's everything that hasn't been ruined yet." I did not understand what she meant when I was 11. I understand it completely now. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. 2 parents, 1 brother, 1 grandmother who lived 40 minutes away in a farmhouse that smelled like the previous century in the best possible way. My parents, Glenn and Sylvia Whitfield, were practical people. My father sold commercial real estate. My mother managed a dental practice. They measured the world in transactions, what things cost, what things were worth, what return you could expect on a given investment. My grandmother, Ruth Whitfield, my father's mother, measured the world in entirely different units. History. Continuity. The difference between what something is worth and what it means. She had inherited the land from her own parents. 41 acres of woodland in rural Adams County, purchased in 1951 for almost nothing, held for decades while the world changed around it. No development. No subdivision. Just trees and a creek and the particular silence of land that has never been asked to be anything other than what it is. My father had wanted to sell it for as long as I could remember. Every few years the conversation surfaced at family dinners, someone had made an offer, a developer was interested, the timing was right. Every few years my grandmother shut it down with the same 2 words. Absolutely not. My father never argued with her directly. He had a particular talent for patience when patience was financially motivated. He would nod. Change the subject. Wait for the next opportunity. I spent summers at my grandmother's farmhouse from the time I was 6 until I was 16. Those summers were the closest thing to peace I knew as a child. No schedules, no performance, no sense that I was being measured against some standard I hadn't been told about. Just Ruth, and the land, and long afternoons that moved at the speed of nothing in particular. She taught me to identify birds by their calls. She taught me to read weather by cloud formations. She taught me that the creek in the eastern corner of the property ran north, which was unusual, and that unusual things were worth paying attention to. She also taught me, though I didn't know it was a lesson at the time, how to be quiet enough to hear what mattered. "Your father sees dollars when he looks at this land," she told me once, when I was 14. We were sitting on the porch watching a storm come in from the west. "That's not wrong. It's just incomplete." "What do you see?" I asked. She thought about it for a long time. "Proof," she said finally. "That something can last." She died 3 weeks after my college graduation. Peaceful, in her own bed, in the farmhouse she had lived in for 40 years. I was the one who got the call. I drove the 40 minutes alone and sat with her for an hour before I called anyone else. The will reading was 2 weeks later. To my son Glenn, the farmhouse and its contents. To my granddaughter Clara, the 41 acres of woodland in Adams County, Ohio, held in a trust established in 2018 under the counsel of attorney Margaret Hale. My father's face did something complicated when Hale read that line. Not surprise exactly. More like the expression of someone who had been playing a long game and just discovered the board had been rearranged while they weren't looking. He recovered quickly. "We'll sort it out as a family," he said. I looked at him across the table. "There's nothing to sort," I said. "It's mine." I was wrong to think that would be the end of it. My father started the pressure campaign 3 days after the will reading. He was subtle about it. My father was always subtle, it was his professional skill, the ability to move toward what he wanted without appearing to want it. He framed everything as concern. As practicality. As family responsibility. That land costs money to maintain, he said, over the phone, 2 days after the reading. Property taxes, liability insurance. You're 24 years old, Clara. You don't have the resources to hold on to something like this. I'll figure it out, I said. A developer has already made contact, he said. The offer is significant. We could split it, give you a substantial portion and use the rest to. Dad. Settle some outstanding. Dad. No. A pause. Then, pleasantly, just think about it. I thought about it. I thought about my grandmother sitting on that porch watching the storm come in. I thought about the creek that ran north. I thought about her voice saying proof that something can last. I called attorney Margaret Hale the next morning. Hale was 62, direct, the kind of woman who did not use 3 words when 2 would do. She had worked with my grandmother for 4 years building the trust structure, quarterly meetings, careful documentation, everything airtight. Your father cannot touch that land, she told me. The trust is irrevocable. The deed transfer requires your signature and only yours. Any attempt to sell without your consent is not just legally invalid, it's fraud. He won't try that, I said. Hale looked at me over her reading glasses. People in financial difficulty, she said carefully, sometimes make decisions they wouldn't otherwise make. I didn't understand what she meant until 8 months later when the letter arrived from the county recorder's office. I called Hale before I called anyone else. I read her the letter over the phone, hand still not entirely steady, coffee still going cold on the table. Silence on her end. Then, send me a photo of that letter right now. I did. She called back in 11 minutes. Your father forged your signature on the deed transfer, she said. The sale went through 8 days ago to a development group based in Cincinnati. The purchase price was $640,000. I sat very still. What happens now? I said. Now, Hale said, and her voice had a particular quality, not angry, not dramatic, just precise, we make a phone call to the Adams County Sheriff's Office. And then we file to have the transfer voided. And then we let the law do what it was built to do. He'll say it was a misunderstanding, I said. He can say whatever he likes, Hale said. We have the original trust documentation, your grandmother's recorded intent, 2 witnesses to the signing, and a forged deed. He does not have a version of this story that ends well for him. I looked at the certified letter on my kitchen table. My grandmother knew, I said. Not a question. She told me, in our first meeting, that your father would try something eventually, Hale said. She said, and I wrote this down because I write everything down, Glenn is a good man who makes bad decisions when he's scared. Make sure Clara is protected from the bad decisions. I held the phone for a long moment. She spent 4 years making sure, I said. Yes, Hale said simply. She did. The sheriff's visit happened on a Thursday. I was not there for it. I did not need to be. Hale handled everything with the efficiency of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment, which in a way she had. My father called me that evening. His voice was different, stripped of the pleasantness, the careful framing, the professional patience. What was underneath was smaller and more frightened than I had expected. Clara. I need you to understand the situation I was in. Dad. The business has been struggling and I made a decision that I know was. Dad. Stop. He stopped. I'm not going to help you explain this, I said. That's not what this call is for. Then what is it for? I want you to know that I know, I said. All of it. The forged signature. The developer. The $640,000. I want you to know that I know, and that Grandma knew you might do something like this, and that she spent 4 years making sure it wouldn't work." A long silence. "She knew," he said. "She knew you," I said. "There's a difference." The deed transfer was voided within 3 weeks. Hale moved fast and precisely, the way she did everything. The development group, to their credit, cooperated fully once it became clear the deed had been fraudulently executed. They had no interest in a legal battle over land they hadn't known was contested. The money was returned. The title came back to the trust. The 41 acres of Adams County woodland went back to being exactly what my grandmother had intended. Mine. Protected. Permanent. My father faced a criminal fraud charge. I will not pretend that was easy to sit with. Whatever he had done, he was still my father, and watching the legal process move against him had a weight to it that I had not fully anticipated. I spoke to Hale about it. "You can choose not to pursue the criminal charge," she said. "That's your right. The civil matter, the voiding of the transfer, proceeds regardless. But the fraud charge requires your cooperation to move forward." "What would you do?" I asked. She thought about it. "I'd ask myself what your grandmother would do," she said. I thought about that for 3 days. I thought about it on my morning runs, at my desk at work, lying awake at 2 in the morning with the particular sleeplessness that comes from carrying a decision you haven't made yet. I thought about my grandmother on that porch, watching the storm. "Your father sees dollars," she had said. "That's not wrong. It's just incomplete." She had not said he was a bad man. She had said he was incomplete. And she had spent 4 years protecting me from his incompleteness rather than trying to change it. I called my father and told him I would not pursue the criminal charge on one condition. He had to tell my mother the truth. The full truth. Not his version, not the managed version, the actual sequence of events, including the forged signature, including the money, including the fact that his own mother had anticipated this and built a legal structure specifically to stop him. He agreed. I don't know exactly what that conversation with my mother looked like. I wasn't there and I didn't ask. But my mother called me 3 days later, and her voice had the particular quality of someone who has recently put down something very heavy. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't," I said. "Clara, Mom. It's okay." It wasn't entirely okay. But it was the truth, and the truth was the only place I knew how to start. I drove out to the land on a Saturday in April. Parked at the edge of the property line the way my grandmother used to. Walked the eastern boundary where the creek ran north. Stood at the tree line for a long time, listening. Not to nothing. To everything that hadn't been ruined. My grandmother had known, from the time I was 11 years old, what this land was for. Not for selling. Not for developing. Not for splitting between people who measure the world in transactions. For this. For a woman in her late 20s standing at the edge of 41 acres on a Saturday morning, knowing that something had been held for her, carefully, legally, lovingly, by someone who understood her before she understood herself. I had a decision to make about the land. What to do with it long term. Whether to place a conservation easement, whether to build eventually, whether to simply hold it the way my grandmother had held it, patiently, without agenda, trusting that its purpose would make itself clear in time. I didn't make that decision that morning. Some decisions shouldn't be rushed. I just walked the boundary. Listened to the creek. Let the trees be tall above me. My father called 2 weeks later. Not about the land. Just to call. His voice was careful, tentative, stripped of the professional smoothness he usually wore like a second coat. We talked for 20 minutes. About nothing significant. About the weather, about my brother's new job, about a restaurant my parents had tried in Columbus. Before he hung up he said, "Clara. I'm sorry." 2 words. Plain. No elaboration. "I know," I said. "She was right about you," he said. "Your grandmother. She always said you were the one who would know what mattered." I looked out my window. She was right about a lot of things, I said. We hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had read the certified letter, hands unsteady, coffee going cold, and I held that phone call for a long time. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Not entirely. But something adjacent to it. Something that felt like the first morning after a very long storm. My name is Clara Whitfield. I am 28 years old. My grandmother left me 41 acres and 4 years of careful preparation and one sentence I have carried every day since she said it. Proof that something can last. She was right. It did.